Welcome everyone to Jews United for Justice's What's at Stake in the 2022 primary elections. My name's Debbie Amster. I use she, her pronouns. I live in Olney and I'm a member of the JUFJ Community Building and Education team. I'm part of the JUFJ team that's presenting this program because I believe elections really matter and I want to be an informed voter. With the Supreme Court's rollback of protections for safe and legal abortion, keeping concealed guns out of public spaces, and the weakening of Miranda rights, it's become even more clear how important local decision-making is to attempt to blunt some of the worst impacts of these decisions. As we were putting together this presentation, we were struck over and over with the enormous impact that our local officials have on our lives and the lives of our neighbors, including jobs, health, schools, housing, transit, and so much more. As happens each election cycle, I find myself getting drawn in by the media's focus on the top of the ticket. And then when it's time to vote, I look at the pages and pages of candidates and I get overwhelmed. What's the difference between state's attorney and the attorney general? Which Board of Education races am I supposed to vote in? What does the Comptroller do? Is it pronounced Comptroller or Controller? That last one is controversial. We've heard it pronounced both ways. For the next hour and a half, we're going to go down the ballot and talk about the offices in Maryland and Montgomery County, and we're going to talk about why they matter. Our goal today is to give you a broad overview and then share lots of resources so you can dig deeper into the issues and races as you prepare to vote in the primary. Throughout the program, we're going to tell stories about the power local elected officials have, using case studies from the issues that JUFJ and our partners work on. The issues that we tell stories about may or may not be the issues that you care about the most. That's okay. We'll be sharing resources so you can research the candidates and learn their positions on the issues that matter to you. We're going to be covering a lot of ground in this program, so just a few notes up front. Everything we're discussing today is nonpartisan and tailored to be shared with congregations and nonprofits. We'll be sending out copies of the slides with all of the links in a follow-up email, and that information will include the races we aren't covering in this presentation. We'll be sharing a number of links in the chat. If you like getting more information as we go, check out the links. If there'll be a distraction, don't worry. We'll be sending them in a follow-up email. Please message your questions to the host and we'll get them answered. If there are any acronyms or terms you don't understand, please be sure to ask for clarification. We'll have an optional additional Q&A at the end to answer any questions we didn't get to during the program. As we get started, we want to share JUFJ's mission because it informs how we think about what's at stake in the primary. We advance economic, racial, and social justice in Maryland and DC by educating and mobilizing our local Jewish communities and allies. We focus on issue-based campaigns that make real, immediate, and concrete improvements in people's lives. Through these campaigns, we develop leaders, build our base, shift the consciousness of our community, and alter relations of power. We work with partner organizations led by and made up of impacted people to build the collective power needed to undo systemic racism and inequity. JUFJ strives to be guided by the sacred values of Jewish tradition and by the history of our ancestors who sought justice. These values sustain us and provide us with ethical and spiritual direction. As a Jewish organization committed to achieving social, economic, and racial justice for all people, when it comes time for an election, we are called not just to vote, but to vote our values. The Jewish sage Hillel taught us that we cannot separate ourselves from the community, And according to Rabbi Yitzchak, whose words are in the Babylonian Talmud, Brachot 55a, a ruler is not to be appointed unless the community is consulted. When we participate in local elections, we take responsibility for ensuring that our leaders represent our values and we strengthen our connection to the larger community. Why do primaries in particular matter? When we say every vote matters at the local level, we're not exaggerating. In 2018, out of a county of about 1 million people, Mark Elrich won the Democratic primary for county executive by only 77 votes. The same year, Sarah Love won the race for District 16 state delegate in the primary by 12 votes. That's far fewer people than people on this call today. So a few important things to know about local elections. All statewide offices in Maryland and almost every county level office in Montgomery County are on the ballot in 2022. In 2018, as in the last few election cycles in Montgomery County, with very few exceptions, every candidate who won the Democratic primary for county positions also won the general election. Voters must be registered with a party to vote in the party primary, except for non-partisan Board of Education races. You still have until midnight tonight to register if you're not. There is no ranked choice voting and no runoffs, which is one of the reasons candidates with a relatively small number of votes can win. We can't say it enough times. At the local level, every vote matters. I'm now going to pass things to Mike to talk about redistricting and the impact it will have on the election.
Thank you. My name is Mike English. I use he, him pronouns, and I live in downtown Silver Spring in State District 20 and what is now County District 5, but will soon be County District 4, which we'll get to in a second. And I'm a member of JUFJ's housing team. As we talk about the different positions on the ballot, a very reasonable question is, what is my district? It would seem that this would be a straightforward question, but it really isn't. Your congressional, state, county, and Board of Education districts are all different. You only vote for candidates in your specific congressional, state, and county districts. Everyone in Montgomery County votes for all Board of Education races, no matter where you live. Voting for the Board of Education is different than for other offices, and we'll explain more about that later in the presentation. Based on the 2020 census results, all districts for all levels of government have been evaluated, and many have been withdrawn. In the 2022 primary, you will vote for candidates in your new districts. The Maryland General Assembly has approved new maps for Maryland's federal and state districts, which have been finalized after legal challenges to both of them. We are putting links in the chat to help you find your new federal and Maryland districts, as well as your current districts and representatives. The main change to Montgomery County state districts is the addition of District 9A, which includes some of Howard County and some of northern Montgomery County. Residents in 9A will vote for 1 state senator and 2 delegates. The other 8 districts in Montgomery County each have 1 state senator and 3 delegates. There are more significant changes to the districts in other parts of the state, especially Baltimore City. JUFJ, Baltimore Jewish Council, and JCRC of Howard County hosted a program on June 15th about statewide redistricting and its impacts. You can find a link to the recording of that program in the chat. Montgomery County completed the process of drawing new maps last December with the support of all council members except for Andrew Friedson, who voted against the final map. The county maps, unlike the state and federal maps, were never challenged in court. You can use the map tool we're putting in the chat to look up your new county district, which again is a district you will vote in this July. We're also putting a link in the chat to find your current Montgomery County district and representatives. In 2020, a ballot question passed that added 2 district seats to the Montgomery County Council, so the new map has 7 districts instead of 5. As the new county districts are being drawn, a key focus was having equitable representation of our county. And with that, we have a few notes about the demographics in Montgomery County. We have 4 of the 10 most culturally diverse cities in the country, including Silver Spring, where I live. More than half of Montgomery County residents are Black, Latinx, and/or Asian American and Pacific Islander. A third of Montgomery County residents were born outside of the United States. And students in Montgomery County public schools come from over 150 countries and speak almost as many different languages. The historic growth of non-white populations is reflected in the fact that 6 of 7 county districts are now majority communities of color. Also, there is a new district in East County where Black residents are the largest ethnic racial group, and a new district in Wheaton where Latinx residents are the largest group. Both of these new districts give strong representation to historically disenfranchised parts of our county. There is also an addition of a second district up county, which was one of the driving factors for adding new districts for the council. And again, as a final reminder, you will vote for your candidates in your new districts in the primary. Before we go on, we're going to transition to a Q&A. Laura, have any questions come in the chat?
Yeah, so far we've had one question about, especially related to redistricting and candidates. Someone asked if we are working to get ranked voting to be implemented in Montgomery County and in Maryland. This is something that JUFJ supports. However, there is not an active campaign for ranked choice voting right now in Montgomery County. There is public financing, which Mike is going to talk about in a second, which is definitely related to the questions of who is running and how do we choose. And so that program we definitely have supported both at the county and the state level. And certainly if there are partners that coalesce around a campaign for ranked choice voting, then that is something that I think there'd be a lot of interest in getting involved in, because it doesn't make a huge difference, especially when you have crowded races, as we'll see in a few minutes when we take a look at the various races happening in our county. Before we go on to the public financing part, is there any other questions? Feel free to either put them in the chat or to raise your Zoom hand so that I can call on you. All right, great. We will, if you come up with any questions after we move on, feel free to message Star Host and we will come back to those questions later on. Back to you, Mike.
Thank you, Laura. Right, so public financing, as Laura said. So it's the last thing we're going to cover before we get on to the individual races. So as Laura was hinting at, public financing is designed to make running for office more equitable and to reduce the influence of large contributions. Candidates who use public financing raise small dollar donations, which are matched by the government on a sliding scale. And only contributions from people who live locally are matched. For 2022, public financing is available statewide for the governor's race, and public financing is also available in Montgomery County and Howard County for county executive and county council races. Throughout the presentation, we have starred the candidates taking public financing. We are sharing this information because it makes a big difference in what your donation means to candidates. For instance, in the county executive race in Montgomery County, if you donate $50 to a candidate participating in public financing, they will receive an additional $300 in matching funds for a total of $350. And it makes a difference in the kind of donations the candidate can receive, since public financing candidates can't take money from corporations or political action committees. We are putting a link in the chat for more information about the various public financing programs in Maryland, and also a link to look up campaign donations, which includes donations for candidates taking both traditional and public financing. It can be helpful to understand who is financially supporting the candidates when you decide how to cast your vote. And again, I'm going to pause here. Laura, do we have any questions?
Not received any. Are there any questions that folks have about public financing? Feel free to raise your Zoom hand or message me in the chat. Okay. All right, we will move on. And again, as always, feel free to put any other questions in the chat and we will come back to them.
All right, thank you. And yeah, now we're going to shift on to discussing the actual positions that will be on the ballot at the state and county level. And we're going to start talking about the state level Maryland, and I'm going to pass it to Heidi.
Thanks, Mike. My name's Heidi Rhodes. I use she, her pronouns, and I live in Colesville, Maryland, and I am on the Montgomery County Leadership Council and co-captain District 14 at the state level. The races we're going to cover today at the state level are the governor and lieutenant governor, the attorney general, the Comptroller, and the General Assembly. Due to recent Supreme Court decisions, state-level leaders, notably the General Assembly and the Governor, will now be even more responsible for abortion rights and preventing the rollback of other protections, as we have seen to the LGBTQ+ community in too many states. We'll start with the Governor and Lieutenant Governor. The Governor leads the executive branch and is responsible for departments including labor, housing, police, education, and many more. The Maryland governor is one of the most powerful in the country because they have significant control over the budget, including the ability to line item veto any spending bill and a broad range of appointive powers. The governor can also veto bills passed by the General Assembly. Governor Hogan has vetoed dozens of bills since he was elected, which include many JUFJ priorities. He has vetoed earned sick and safe leave, $15 minimum wage, parole reform, building a women's pre-release facility, multiple police accountability bills, and multiple immigration rights bills. Vetoes can be overridden by the state legislature with a 3/5 majority, but that often adds another year to the process because the veto override usually doesn't happen until the following year's legislative session. The governor and lieutenant governor are elected as a ticket every 4 years in non-presidential election years. There's a 2-term limit, which means Governor Larry Hogan and Lieutenant Governor Boyd Rutherford cannot run again. The lieutenant governor is elected along with the governor, and the candidate for governor usually picks a running mate who will help balance the ticket along gender, racial, and geographic lines. There are currently 9 candidates for governor running in the Democratic primary. Throughout the presentation, each candidate's name that is in a bright blue is a link to their campaign website. When you get the copy of the slides in the follow-up email, we hope you will take the time to visit their websites and learn more about the candidates. The names that are in dark blue are the ones we couldn't find websites for. If you find any websites that we missed, please send us the link so we can update our materials. You'll also see that the candidates who are taking public financing are marked with a star next to their name. There are 4 candidates running in the Republican primary for governor. Since there's no incumbent and such a large number of candidates running in the primary, it makes being an informed voter in the primary even more important. While there is some coverage of local elections in the Washington Post, it's important to have dedicated local news sources. Towards the end of the presentation, we'll share a short list of local news sources that are go-tos. Maryland Matters is one example of a great local resource and has articles and lists of endorsements for all the statewide candidates, including Governor, Attorney General, and Comptroller. There's a link in the chat for that information. When we think about what's at stake in the governor's race, one key thing we think about is the future of the state's budget and how we invest in our community's most vulnerable residents. Much of the funding for our counties comes from the state, including significant funding for infrastructure and schools. Right now, there are a number of unfunded mandates for important projects that have been passed by the legislature but not included in Governor Hogan's budgets. One such unfunded mandate is a $3.5 million designated by the legislature to train nurse midwives, physician's assistants, and others to perform abortions in preparation for the likely influx of people seeking to get abortions in Maryland. The next governor will determine if the funding is released for that training. Another example is the Women's Pre-Release Center, which has been a priority issue for JUFJ and our partners at Out for Justice and Maryland Justice Project. Pre-release centers help people nearing the end of their prison sentences secure employment, housing, drug treatment, and mental health services. Right now, there are a number of such facilities for men in Maryland, but none for women. Legislation passed requiring a facility for women, but Governor Hogan did not fund it. After a 2-year struggle to secure funding, advocates successfully lobbied the legislature to include $2 million in the 2024 capital budget. Our next governor will have the power to veto legislation and delay funding, or to move quickly to support those who need it most, like the women moving from incarceration back into the community. With so many candidates, your vote in this packed race will make a difference. Next, I'm going to pass it to Joe to talk about the Attorney General's race.
Thanks, Heidi. My name is Joe Schifrin. I use she, her pronouns. I live in Bethesda, which is County District 1 and State District 16. and I'm on the Montgomery County Leadership Council of JUFJ and the core team. So what is the Attorney General's role? The Attorney General is Maryland's chief legal officer. They supervise and direct legal affairs in the state and legally advise state agencies and other institutions in all branches of state government. This includes reviewing rules and regulations before they're put into effect and enforcing consumer and commerce protections. The Attorney General represents the state in statewide and federal litigation, including prosecuting crimes against the state and appeals of criminal convictions. The county level state's attorney, which we will discuss later in the program, is responsible for crimes against people and private property in the county. The Attorney General is elected every 4 years with no term limits. The current Attorney General, Brian Frosh, is not running again. There are currently 4 candidates to replace Brian Frosh, 2 Democrats and 2 Republicans. You can learn more about the candidates by using the Maryland Matters resources and visiting their campaign websites. One of the things at stake in the Attorney General's race is the critical role the Attorney General plays in issuing guidance on all sorts of important questions. For example, this year, the Attorney General has issued guidance on the implementation of the use of force policy and police accountability boards that were both passed last year. We saw a tremendous impact from the Attorney General issuing guidance a few years ago when it led to a rule change that significantly limited the use of cash bail. Cash bail keeps people incarcerated without being convicted of any crime while waiting for their trial, just because they don't have cash available to pay their bail. JUFJ and our partners, including the ACLU, the Public Justice Center, and Out for Justice, worked for years to end the cash bail system in Maryland. And it took the Attorney General's guidance to finally stop judges from setting bail amounts that people can't afford. The selection of our next Attorney General will impact a whole range of issues, from court and prison reform to gun violence prevention to protecting the rights of immigrants and renters. Especially with an open seat, your vote in the Attorney General's race will really matter. Before we continue, are there any questions about the governor or Attorney General races?
So I haven't gotten any questions at this point in the chat. Is there anyone who has a question would like to raise their Zoom hand, and we can unmute you to share your question? Great, great, okay. Oh, there we go, yep. Judy, Judy, you should, there you go. Go ahead, Judy.
I just had mentioned in the chat earlier that on my sample ballot that I got in the mail, Rushern Baker is still on it, but I understand he's now pulled out. So that's kind of important, piece of information. Will they be correcting that sample ballot for the actual ballot, which isn't that far away?
It's a great, great question, and I'm really glad you raised it. So no, because of the timing of when Rushern Baker withdrew from the race, the ballots were already printed, both the sample ballots and the ballots that you'll be using if you go and vote in person. So Rushern Baker will still be listed, but it is important information to know. He was the only candidate taking public financing. His running mate was Nancy Navarro, who is a term limited council member here from Montgomery County. He has withdrawn. So please be sure to vote for someone else so that your vote will count. That is a really, really good, it's a really good question. And it is hard a little bit because if people come in and they don't know that information, then they could vote, essentially throw away their vote by voting for someone who's withdrawn. Thanks, Judy. Anything else about that? Yep, hold on, Meryl.
I was wondering about that. When you do go to vote, will they say that Rushern Baker is not on the ballot, or when you go to vote, will the election judges give that information out?
I don't think so. There's so much
Okay.
information. There's so much that they're trying to do to make sure that everybody can vote, safely and securely and swiftly. That I don't think that information. I could be wrong, but I have not heard plans to make sure that they're saying that at the polling sites.
Okay, so that's a very important thing, because then that would mean that, that maybe somebody else that really should get the vote. And okay, so I'll just be aware of it. Thanks so much.
And that does go back to the earlier question about ranked choice voting, because if we had ranked choice voting, even if you voted for Rashern Baker and he didn't get a plurality, then his votes would roll over to the next person, and it would help with the whole process. So that all
Okay.
ties back together.
Okay, thank you.
All right, go ahead, Kyson. Let's see, if you're asking your question, we can't hear you.
Kirsten also sent their question in the chat. So the question was if the governor and attorney general work together at all, and if so, what that relationship is. And if there's any clarification to add to that, please feel free to message me in the chat, and I'm happy to add new ones.
Great. So that's a really great question. So I will say that the current governor and the current attorney general are often at odds. They have different political goals, oftentimes have sparred in many different ways. That was true, especially during the Trump administration, when Brian Frosh, our attorney general, was one of the leading attorney generals across the country who was suing the Trump administration for various actions that were legal, unconstitutional, and it even continued within the Biden administration. There still has continued to be some tensions there. So I think that we really see, just like we see with, for instance, we mentioned with Governor Hogan, the veto overrides, when you have the different parts of government that are, at odds with each other, then it slows everything way down, and it makes certain types of reforms that we're trying to accomplish much more challenging, to not have people aligned about the kind of reforms that we need to be doing across the state. So we'll certainly see neither Brian Frosh nor Governor Hogan will be in those roles starting after the elections. And so I think it's an opportunity to potentially have an attorney general and a governor that will be working together in a way that has not been happening in the current administration. Great, these are all really great questions. I do want to go ahead and move us to the next part of the program just to keep us on time. But please continue to share any questions with me or Devorah in the chat so that we can come back to them. And I'll turn it back over to Joe.
Okay, thanks, Laura. The Maryland.
Sorry, Joe, I meant to mute myself and I muted you. Go ahead. And I'm muting myself now.
Okay. The Maryland State Comptroller is Maryland's chief financial officer and accountant. The Comptroller's office collects $16 billion a year in state and local taxes, conducts audits of taxpayers, and provides information technology services for most state agencies. The Comptroller, the Governor, and the State Treasurer form the Board of Public Works, which is the highest administrative body in Maryland state government. This board is responsible for reviewing and approving capital projects, procurement contracts, and the acquisition, use, and transfer of state assets. The board also oversees budget actions when the legislature is out of session, which is 3/4 of the year, and is a key decision maker on transit projects. Remember, the legislature is only in session for 90 days, from January through early April. Since the treasurer is appointed and he's not elected, the elected role of comptroller is especially important. Okay, the comptroller is elected every 4 years with no term limits. Peter Francho, who has been comptroller since 2006, is running for governor. So there are 3 people running to replace him. 2 Democrats and 1 Republican. What's at stake in the Comptroller's race? Well, Marylanders' financial security and economic well-being are top of the list. Many people have heard about the Board of Public Works in the context of Governor Hogan's efforts to widen Interstate 270 and Interstate 495. You might have heard less about the board's decision-making power over the state budget. In June 2020, the Board of Public Works voted 2-1 to cut $413 million from the state budget, slashing funding for universities and community colleges, along with many other programs. JUFJ joined AFSCME, which is the union that represents 28,000 state and higher education employees in Maryland, to call on the board not to cut an additional $205 million, which would have impacted pension payments for teachers, subsidies for childcare, and rental assistance. This time, Comptroller Peter Francho voted no instead of yes, and those cuts were voted down. The next Comptroller will have tremendous power, both in their own right and as part of the 3-person Board of Public Works. As one of the lesser-known positions on the ballot, and with no incumbent for the first time in 16 years, every vote in this race will really matter. I'll now turn things over to Anita to talk about the General Assembly, which is the Maryland State Legislature.
Thank you, Joe. My name is Anita Lampel. I use the She series. I live in Bethesda, District 1 for the county and 16 for the state, and I am on the JUFJ Leadership Council. So what is the role of the General Assembly? Our General Assembly creates all the laws for the state of Maryland. The state legislatures meet for a 90-day session between January and April of each year to consider thousands of bills and pass hundreds of them. They also sometimes meet for a special session between regular sessions. As we've shared, the legislature has the power to overturn the governor's vetoes with a 3/5 majority vote. Currently, Democrats have a supermajority in the General Assembly, and they have overridden many of Governor Hogan's vetoes on party lines, but it's not a given that every veto will be overridden. In most cases, the veto process delays legislation and funding for at least a year. In an election year like this one, anything the governor vetoed after the session ended cannot be overridden, and the process needs to start all over from scratch when the new legislature takes office next January. The General Assembly approves the state budget, and beginning in 2023, they will have new powers to add spending to the budget. Members of the legislature provide constituent services such as helping people navigate state agencies. Who's up for election? The Maryland General Assembly is made up of 141 members of the House of Delegates and 47 members of the state Senate. The entire General Assembly is up for election every 4 years, and there are no term limits. There are 47 legislative districts. Most districts have 1 state senator and 3 members of the House of Delegates. Some House districts, however, are single-member districts, which means that each person votes for 1 senator and only 1 delegate. On the next few slides, you'll see all the current General Assembly candidates for Montgomery County districts organized by district. The state senator candidates are highlighted in beige, and the state delegate candidates are highlighted in yellow. Each candidate's party designation is included, and all the incumbents are marked with a little up arrow. There are too many races to go into in depth for all of them, so I'm only going to highlight a couple of races. Because of redistricting, Some residents in Montgomery County will vote for the first time in District 9A, where a sitting Republican delegate is running against the incumbent Democratic senator. All the other state delegates and senators are running for re-election, with the exception of Jim Gilchrist from District 17, who's not seeking re-election. There are 3 non-incumbents running in that district, 2 Democrats and 1 Republican. Just a reminder that in districts with 3 delegates like District 17, you can vote for up to 3 candidates for delegate. The top 3 candidates from each primary will move on to the general election, and the 3 candidates who get the most votes in the general election serve as delegates. The process is the same for District 9A, but for 2 delegates instead of 3. In a number of districts, the current state senators and delegates are running unopposed in the party primaries. For all of the incumbents, in addition to visiting their campaign websites, you can check out their profiles on the Maryland General Assembly website to see what committee they serve on and what legislation they have supported. We're putting that link in the chat, and again, you'll have that information sent to you. So what's at stake in the General Assembly races? What isn't at stake? The General Assembly makes decisions that impact everyone in Maryland, covering topics from expanding health care coverage and protecting the environment to addressing food insecurity and preventing gun violence. We saw an example of the General Assembly acting to protect vulnerable members of our community last December, when they voted to override Governor Hogan's veto of a law called Dignity Not Detention. Now, Dignity Not Detention prohibits local contracts with Immigration and Customs Enforcement, or ICE, so people don't end up in jail just because of their immigration status. The law also requires more oversight of private ICE detention centers and prohibits law enforcement from asking about citizenship or immigration status. It took the combined effort of advocates led by CASA and supportive lawmakers to pass this legislation and override the governor's veto. This is just one example of what's at stake. Who represents us in Annapolis next year will determine whether or not the next General Assembly will work on behalf of people who have been too often ignored and marginalized, including renters, immigrants, and people, including children, who are in the criminal justice system. Your vote in the General Assembly races will shape our state for years to come. And remember, Sarah Love, who is a delegate, won by only 12 votes. Are there any questions about the Comptroller or General Assembly races?
Great. While we're seeing if anybody has a question, again, feel free to message it in the chat or to raise your hand. There is one clarification that I wanted to make, which is that Al Carr, and I'm going to try to go back here on the slides. Great, got it. So Al Carr was one of the delegates for District 18. He did, at the very last minute, decide, rather than running for re-election, that he was going to run for County Council District 4, which we'll talk about here in a few minutes. And so that means that there was only 2 at that point, people running for 3 slots. So Emily Shetty and Jared Solomon were running, but there are 3 delegates per district. So the process to find another candidate, because the filing deadline had already passed, it isn't an open election or anything like that. What happens is people apply to the Democratic Central Committee who are interested in being added to the ballot. And then the Central Committee does a series of interviews, and then they actually make the selection of who is going to be added to the ballot. And given that there are 3 Democratic candidates, and we know that in Montgomery County, almost without exception, who wins the Democratic primary is also who wins the general election. It means that really the Central Committee picked who then that third delegate is going to be going to Annapolis next year for District 18. So it does highlight a real challenge in the system that we have set up, that if for some reason somebody can't serve as a senator or as a delegate, that power to appoint somebody else goes to the Central Committee as opposed more open to the voters of that district. And I know that there are people that have been trying to get that changed in Annapolis over the years, many local activists and some legislators who also believe that those should be more open elections as opposed to appointment processes. Great. And then I did get another question in the chat asking about the General Assembly, the fact that they're only in session for 3 months. What happens to their work the other 9 months? So really the 3-month session is a legacy from when the people who were our General Assembly were, gentlemen farmers. At that time, it was only gentlemen. And so the General Assembly is January through April, as Joe said earlier, which are the times that no one is, needed at home for planting or harvesting. That has continued. There have been some efforts to change the timing so that it does last longer. However, there is a cost involved for the length, based on the length of the legislature, because you're paying for not only the delegates and the senators, you're paying for their staff. And so they haven't invested the money to make that session longer. People who are delegates and senators, most of them have other jobs because the pay that you get to be a delegate or a senator is not enough. It is not enough to live on. It is actually pretty close to the minimum wage or a little bit more for a full-time job here in Montgomery County, which no one should have to live on because the minimum wage is too low. And so during the rest of the year, they do their other jobs and they still do work for Annapolis as well during those other 9 months. They meet with constituents, they plan their legislation, they meet with advocates, because really those 3 months go by in a flash. And so in order to be effective, either as an advocate or as a legislature during the 3 months of Annapolis, you really have to get your ducks in a row in those other 9 months. So when session starts, you can be effective from day one. Okay, great. So we are going to move on. If there's any other questions about the General Assembly or the Comptroller, please message them to me or Devorah, and we will come back to them here in a minute.
Okay. My name is Dee Dee Jacobson. I use she, her pronouns. I live in Rockville, North Bethesda, which is State District 16. It used to be County District 1, but it's going to be County District 4. And we're going to talk about what's at stake for the different county level offices that are going to be on the primary ballot in July. We'll be covering the county executive, the county council, the state's attorney, and the Board of Education. The races that we aren't discussing today, like the sheriff, judges of the circuit court, will be covered in the follow-up materials. So we'll start with the county executive. The county executive leads the executive branch of our county government, kind of like a mayor. They lead all executive departments, including Health and Human Services, the Police Department, and the Department of Transportation. The county executive proposes the county's operating and capital budgets and is responsible for implementing and enforcing county legislation. The executive plays a critical role in how the county handles everything from combating climate change to emergency rental assistance and to protecting civil rights. So we choose a new county executive every 4 years, and the county executive is limited to 3 terms or 12 years. As with the statewide races, there are too many county candidates. There are too many candidates to say anything about each one. So we'll let you know who the incumbents are and any other key information about the race. And much like Maryland Matters at the state level, Bethesda Beat has a helpful voter guide for the county elections, and that link is going to be put in the chat. The current county executive, Mark Elrich, is in his first term and is running for re-election. There are 3 other candidates running in the Democratic primary and 2 candidates running in the Republican primary. When we think about what's at stake in the county executive race, one big question is whether or not a racial equity lens is used in decision-making. JUFJ and our partners in the Montgomery County Racial Equity or MORE Network worked hard to pass strong legislation to require an equity lens in Montgomery County. In 2019, the Office of Racial Equity and Social Justice was created and began implementing a racial equity framework in the work of the executive branch, including hiring, training, budgeting, and community engagement. Since 2019, additional funds for staff and training have been added to the budget every year to strengthen the work of the Equity Office, including in the fiscal year 2023 budget that was just approved. Whoever the county executive is for the next 4 years will play a big role in the future of the Equity Office, such as deciding the size of the budget and staff, how seriously the recommendations will be taken, and overall how successful the office will be in accomplishing its mandate of moving Montgomery County towards racial equity. Last election cycle, 77 votes made the difference in the county executive race. Your vote will matter. So now we're going to dig into the county council races. The county council is the legislative branch of the county government. In addition to writing the county's laws, the council reviews, amends, and approves both the operating and the capital budget. They oversee land use and confirm the appointments of key members of the county executive's administration. And as we've seen during the COVID crisis, the county council acts as the Board of Health, which has included decisions about mask mandates and vaccine requirements. They've also been responsible for making emergency funds available to help individual and businesses. Council members are also responsible for helping their constituents navigate county government to get the services they need. When you have a problem or a complaint, you can turn to your district council member or to any of the at-large council members for assistance. So, who is up for election on the county council? Montgomery County Council currently consists of 5 district members and 4 at-large members. But starting in this year's election, in this primary, there will be 7 district representatives and 4 at-large members. The entire 11-member council is elected at the same time to serve a 4-year term. And like the county executive, council members are limited to 3 terms or 12 years. 3 council members are not running for re-election because of term limits, and 1 council member is running for a different position. This turnover, plus the 2 new district seats, means there are 6 open seats with no incumbents in the upcoming election. So now I'm going to go through the council races, and as you will see, there are lots of candidates. One big reason is the widespread use of public financing, which has made it possible for more people to run for council. And as we go through these slides, please message the host in the chat which council district is your district for the 2022 elections. And we're going to put in the link of the new map in the chat for you to reference. Okay, so I think we'll start with District 1 and 2. District 1 includes most of Potomac and Bethesda and is the only district where white voters are the largest ethnic or racial group. Andrew Friedson is currently finishing his first term on the council, and he's running unopposed for re-election in District 1. District 2 encompasses the northwestern corner of our county. It includes North Potomac, Poolesville, Germantown, and Clarksburg. Councilmember Craig Rice is term limited, so District 2 is an open seat. District 3 includes the city of Gaithersburg and the city of Rockville. Sidney Katz is currently finishing his second term on the council, and he is running for re-election in District 3. District 4 includes North Bethesda, Silver Spring, and Tacoma Park. There is no incumbent running for this seat. So Laura, do you want to call out some of the districts people have listed?
Yeah,
So far?
absolutely. We've got some folks that live in District 4, some folks that live in District 6. We've got a bunch of folks from District 1, a couple from District 7. Someone just shared that they are in District 2. I will say this kind of civic education program, we really would love to make sure everybody leaves here knowing what your county district is. So if you don't know your county district, please look it up using that map we put in the chat and then message me. We'll see if we manage to have people from all 7 council districts as we do this call. And back over to you, Dee Dee.
Okay, so District 5. District 5 is the East County, which includes Four Corners area of Silver Spring, White Oak, Fairland Briggs Cheney, Burtonsville, and Leisure World. And as we mentioned earlier, Black residents are the largest ethnic racial group in this district. And there's no incumbent running for this seat either. District 6 includes Wheaton, Glenmont, and Aspen Hill, and is the district where Latinx residents are the largest ethnic racial group. Councilmember Nancy Navarro is term limited, so District 6 is an open seat. District 7 includes Olney, Durwood, Montgomery Village, and Damascus. And District 7 is a new district, so there's no incumbent. All right, Laura, before we do at large, did we make all the districts?
We did. We have
Yay.
Representatives from all 7 councilmanic districts on the call. I'm thrilled that the whole county is represented. And I'm thrilled that so many of you know what your county district is. Those have changed for so many folks, and really, really critical that we know that going into this election.
Great. All right, now we're going to go to at-large members. At-large members can live anywhere in the county, and they represent the entire county. So everyone here will be voting for at-large members. In the at-large race, you can vote for up to 4 candidates, and the top 4 vote getters will serve on the council. Gabe Albernaz, Evan Glass, and Will Jawando are all completing their first term and are all running for re-election. Tom Hucker currently represents what's now District 5, and he began running by county executive, and then he switched to the at-large race at the filing deadline. So he's now also running for an at-large seat. So that's a lot of races and a lot of candidates. And we're going to take a moment. We're going to do a few deep breaths and let that all sink in before we talk about why this is important. Okay, I need to take a breath. So now that we've walked through all the council races, let's talk about what's at stake for the county council. One key issue at stake is whether or not our next council strengthens or weakens vital renter protections during the ongoing pandemic. JUFJ and our partners in the More Network housing team worked hard to get emergency rent stabilization protections. These protections expired in May, leaving thousands of renters at risk of eviction. As people are starting to get notices of rent increases of 15 or 20% or even more, a new bill is going to be introduced by Councilmember Will Jawando with the support of County Executive Elrich, which will limit how much rents can increase. We hope this new bill will be introduced. This is a powerful reminder that the council members we elect have the power to strengthen or weaken the critical protections to keep people safely housed. In addition to housing, the council members we elect will determine whether or not future legislation will move this county in the direction of equity and justice on everything from public safety to mental health crisis response to mental health supports. In 2018, most council races were decided by small margins. The county council races matter, and your vote matters here. Before we continue with the state's attorney race, were there any other questions that came up, Laura, about county executive or county council?
I haven't gotten any questions in the chat. Is there anybody that wants to raise their Zoom hand that has a question about the county executive or county council? Okay. All right, great. We will keep moving. As always, feel free to message me or Devorah. We can always come back to it.
All right. I'm going to actually now turn things over to Mike, who's going to talk about Montgomery County State's attorney race.
Thank you, Dee Dee. Yeah, so right off the bat, despite the name, the state's attorney is a county position and works at the county level. If you're confused, that just means you're paying attention. I, grasped this one relatively recently myself. And the state's attorney is the prosecutor for all criminal offenses under state and local laws. Each state's attorney is independent, not reporting to any other legislative body or executive official. The state's attorney has broad powers to determine whom to prosecute, what charges to bring, and what pretrial releases and sentencing recommendations to make, including recommendations to reduce sentences for those already incarcerated. They also decide how diversion programs are used, which are alternatives to putting people into the criminal justice system. All of this means that the state's attorney has a big role to play in public safety and how the justice system works in the county. The state's attorney is elected every 4 years, and there are no term limits. John McCarthy has been the state's attorney since 2006, and he is running again. He has 3 challengers in Democratic primary. Currently, no Republicans have filed to run. There's a tremendous amount at stake in the state's attorney's race, especially considering this is a race that usually doesn't get that much attention. We need to address the failures of the criminal justice system, which continues to disproportionately harm Black and brown people and people who are poor, experiencing homelessness, or suffering from mental illness. We aren't using a lot of statistics in today's presentation, but we think these two are striking enough that they are worth sharing. In 2020, Black people made up only 18% of the county population, but were 54% of the people held in county jail. And from 2011 to 2020, 90% of youth in detention were Black, brown, or other children of color. We're sharing a document in the chat with a list of reforms to begin to address those inequities, which follow the model of other states' attorneys from around the country. This list of reforms is supported by JUFJ and our partners, including the ACLU, CASA, and many others. As is shared in the one-pager, we look to the state's attorney we elect to make reforms that increase public safety and reduce harm, including the following: seeking shorter sentences and reviewing current sentences for possible reduction, charging children as children and not as adults, no matter what the charge, increasing transparency and providing data about charges, convictions, and sentences, not charging people with crimes because they are homeless, in possession of drugs, or experiencing symptoms of mental illness, and not requiring payment for diversion programs meant to keep people out of the criminal justice system. Down ballot, lesser known offices play such an important role in our local government. And in this race, as with all races, every vote matters. The last race we're going to cover is the Board of Education, and we're going to pass the mic to Anita to walk us through that one.
Thank you, Mike. So the Board of Education oversees all Montgomery County Public Schools, acronym MCPS. But what does that mean? The board is the official policy-making body for the schools, including setting COVID policies. The board determines how to spend the money allocated by the county, establishes the curriculum, appoints the school superintendent, and determines school boundaries. The county executive and the county council play an oversight role for MCPS through the budget process. But otherwise, the Board of Education is responsible for the management of the entire school district. Who is running for the Board of Education? The new Board of Education districts have been finalized, and they are largely the same as before, with the line between the 2nd and 3rd district moving to account for population changes. The Board of Education has 8 members, and they serve 4-year terms with no term limits. The terms are staggered, with districts 1, 3, 5, and 1 at-large member up for election in gubernatorial election years, and districts 2, 4, and the other at-large member up for election in presidential years. The 8th member is the student member of the board, who is elected annually by all MCPS secondary students. The student member votes on everything except personnel matters. Beyond having staggered terms, there are a number of ways that the Board of Education elections are different from other county elections. First, they are non-partisan, which means that everyone can vote in the primary without being registered with a political party. Second, like the county council, board members must live in the district they represent, and at-large members can live anywhere in the county. However, unlike the county council, all Board of Education members are elected by everyone in the county. So voters will have all 4 Board of Education members on the ballot this year. The top 2 candidates from the primary move on to the general election. If only 1 or 2 candidates run in a Board of Education race, they do not appear on the primary ballot, and they advance directly to the general election. We know the details of the Board of Education election can be quite confusing for us too. We'll pause for questions in just a minute. We're not going to walk through the Board of Education races, but the follow-up materials will have the list of candidates by district along with their website links. So what's at stake in the Board of Education races? One of the most high stakes and emotionally charged issues in the county is the question of our schools. The Board of Education is responsible for everything from budget to curriculum to COVID response. Just one piece of that overall responsibility is to support the mental health needs of students, especially since so many of our young people are in crisis, and there is a long history of inadequate mental health supports in Montgomery County schools. Student and parent leaders from Young People for Progress, Racial Justice Now, STEPS, and many others have been calling for culturally competent mental health professionals, wellness centers, restorative justice programs, and wraparound services. The next Board of Education will decide whether or not to prioritize and invest in these critical student supports. Are there any questions about the state's attorney or Board of Education races?
Haven't got any questions in the chat. Is there any questions people have? Want to raise their Zoom hand around state's attorney or Board of Education? Okay. All right, great. We can always come back. We'll move on for now.
All right. As we mentioned earlier, we won't be covering the rest of the Montgomery County races in this presentation, but we will share information about those roles and who's running in the follow-up materials. Those races include sheriff, clerk of the circuit court, register of wills, judges of the circuit court, and the Democratic and Republican Central Committees. Okay, that was a lot. Let's take one last deep breath, and I'm going to turn it over to Heidi to talk about what we can do between now and election to make a difference. Heidi?
Apologies, before Heidi hops on, Kyoshin asked for another question, another excellent question, so thank you. And her question is, why do I have 3 districts to vote for on the Board of Education on my ballot? And this is a very complicated one. Actually, it's pretty simple. So essentially, even though there are multiple districts in the Board of Education race, the answer to your question, Kyoshin, is that everyone votes for all Board of Education candidates that are on the ballot. So even though the districts delineate where candidates need to live to declare themselves to run in a particular district, all of us vote for all of the Board of Education candidates. So that piece is different from the county council race. And I see your thumbs up. So I think we clarified that. Okay, now we'll really pass it to Heidi. Thank you, Anita. And Heidi, I'll spotlight you now.
Great. I hope you're inspired to take action to ensure that our county and state elected officials reflect your values. Here are 3 things you can do to take action. Number 1, stay informed. It can be hard to find media coverage of your local elections. You've made the really good decision to start with this presentation today, and we have a lot of local media resources that we've shown you in the list. We've mentioned Maryland Matters, great source for news for state level issues, and there are a number of options for Montgomery County as well on the list. If you like podcasts, check out I Hate Politics, which many JUFJers have found very helpful in learning about issues and candidates. This list of resources, as a reminder, will be in your follow-up email, and it's also on our election resource page, which there's a link going in the chat right now for that. This slide has a screenshot of what kind of information you'll find on the election resource page. A few things I want to point out. In the Who is Running section, there's a link to a request an election guide from the League of Women Voters. We know many people find that to be a valuable resource, including me. I've used it for years. Candidate forums are a valuable tool to hear directly from the candidates, and there are recordings from a number of past forums in that section. Action number 2, vote. If you haven't heard it enough from us tonight, vote. We've said many times, there's so much at stake in the primary election, and every vote matters. Early voting is July 7th to the 14th from 7 a.m. to 8 p.m. You can go to any of the 14 early voting sites to vote. In the presentation and on the election resources page is a link to find the site closest to you. You can also register to vote at any of the early voting sites. Any registered voter can vote by mail. If you know you like to vote by mail, you can select that option for all future ballots on your mail-in ballot application. As you can see in the slide, you have until July 12th to request a mail-in ballot by mail, until July 15th to request mail-in ballot online, and until Election Day to request a mail-in ballot in person at a local Board of Elections. Many people have already started receiving their mail-in ballots, me included. Just remember that you're not obligated to mail your ballot in right away. The weeks before an election can include lots of news that might influence your position. Your mail-in ballot needs to be mailed or put in an election drop box by 8 p.m. on Election Day. And all this is leading up to primary election day, which is July 19th. And the third action you can take, talk to your friends and neighbors about voting in the primary. We hope you're inspired today not just to vote, but also to share the information about the primary and why it matters with other people in your life. We've said it before, Mark Elrich won by 77 votes and Sarah Love by only 12. By talking to the people you know, you can influence the outcome of this election. Also, we're happy to share this presentation with people in your network. If you want to host a What's at Stake program, just let us know in the feedback form, which we're putting a link to in the chat right now. While everyone fills out the feedback form, I want to thank you for being here today. We're thrilled for opportunities like this to come together to learn and take action. If you have questions that we haven't answered, please feel free to stay on Zoom after we conclude. We have some additional time to ask for you to ask questions. And thank you so much for filling out the feedback form, which I'm sure all of you are doing right now. It's really very helpful for us as we work to make this presentation as useful as possible. And to close, we have one last thought to share. When JUFJers are together in person, we wear our blue JUFJ shirts and also on Zoom sometimes. And one of our favorite teaching is on the back. It comes from Pirkei Avot, or Ethics of Our Sages. And it says, it is not on you to finish the work, but you can't quit either. We can't complete the work in any one election cycle, but we can't sit them out either. Each election is important. There's too much at stake to sit this one out, so go out and vote in the primary.